This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. With Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you on this Monday morning, halfway through the month of May. And as we end, or near the end of the month of May, that means the SEC baseball tournament not too far away. And unfortunately for the South Carolina baseball team, it was another trip on the road and another series loss against the Arkansas Razorbacks this weekend. On the bright side, you did win one of those games on Saturday to at least end the losing streak, but the rough patch for South Carolina continues, and according to the latest D1 baseball rankings this morning, South Carolina has now dropped outside of the top 10.
I mean, this one, I'll say, did feel a little bit different for me than the week before. And, you know, it felt much more competitive. Not that Gamecock fans are happy with the result by any means, but you know, I thought there were some encouraging signs. You know, you look at what Eli Jones did. Every time they've sort of turned to Eli Jones in a starting role, it feels like he has stepped up. I thought he was outstanding on Friday and really probably deserved, to get to win the game, or at least put South Carolina in a position to go win the game. So I thought, there was really not much positive at all to take from that Kentucky series, getting swept, just not very competitive games for the most part. This felt to me, and I'd be curious to see what fans think, but this felt to me more like, okay, this is the SEC. You're playing great teams. You're playing another team that is, top 5 on the road. That's only the one win for South Carolina in the series was only the second home loss for Arkansas in SEC play this year. Incredible environment. And, it just kind of felt like a better team won at their place. So for me, I actually, as weird as it is, because Carolina did not have a good week overall, if you look at that number, losing the midweek, then losing 2 out of 3. But I felt like there was something to build from. Now they've got to beat Charlotte in the midweek this week, and then they got to find a way to pack Founders Park this weekend and put themselves in a position to win 2 out of 3.
I have a lot of thoughts. I have a big picture one, but when you look back at this weekend, I think looking at it through the lens of what else has happened lately kind of colors what you may think of this series, because if South Carolina had, say, not gotten swept by Kentucky, or they have won the Auburn series, or they had won the Kentucky series, you would kind of look at it exactly how you said, Wes, is, okay, you went on the road at a place that's a beautiful park, it's always packed, and you lost to a team that's really, really good, and it was very competitive, and you would kind of just chalk it up as that was a tough weekend, but you played a really good team and lost. Instead, what you have is the other things that have happened. You did lose the series to Auburn at home. you did get swept by Kentucky. You've have had some struggles really since the start of the Auburn series. It's kind of things have flipped. And it's been, yes, there's been some injuries, but things have also come back down to earth a little bit. Your starting pitching that was so good all year started kind of letting you down. Some guys got banged up. Some hitters have kind of come back to earth who'd been really hot all year. Ethan Petrie has come back down to earth a little bit, understandably. And so when you look at it like that, it has a little bit of a different feel, different vibe, and you can look at it differently than, oh, you just lost a series to a top 5 team. But it did, I think that was a great point, Wes. It did, you can also fall victim to overreacting to it because Arkansas is so good. You can also kind of let what else has happened lately color it to the point where you go, well, the season is lost now. It's a complete disaster. And this team was a lot more competitive. You know, Friday's game was very close. Saturday you win. Then yesterday's game, you know, you look up, you check the score. I think in the third inning, fourth inning, it's all knotted up at 1. You have one bad inning, and then you end up losing the game. So it was competitive. It could have gone either way. I think last week, Wes, you said you needed to get 1, and they did that. You know, how big will that end up being? I think it really depends on what this team does the rest of the season and also what these other teams do.
Well, and don't look now, but that Auburn team that came in here and we were all sort of, I guess, talking very badly about that series loss for South Carolina. They're now 14-13 in SEC play as well. So you look, I mean, you got, Florida, Vandy, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee in the East all have 14 or more wins. And then Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, and Alabama all have 13 or more wins in the West. And, of course, Auburn now 14-13 has a over 500 record in league play. So I think some of this is just, I mean, this is a league you're going to beat up on each other. The team, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. The team that is now leading the East, or at least tied for the league in the East as far as conference record, Florida, is a team South Carolina swept all 3 games here in Columbia. Florida's 17-9. They've got the best record in the East. So, I mean, yes, there are still issues. Carolina's got to keep pushing. This is a massive weekend. I think it goes back to getting yourself, building that cushion to start with, to when you knew the inevitable sort of slump would come. Some of it has been because of injuries. Some of it has just been your typical baseball slump and playing good teams. And so now it kind of all comes down to one weekend, and you can still be a host, a regional host if Carolina has a good week. And their record right now still as much as has happened the last 3 weeks. South Carolina is 25-4 at home, which if you look around the league, that is still one of, if not the best. So Arkansas is 30-4 overall at home, but Carolina has the best record at home other than Arkansas. So I think if you look at the importance of this weekend and the importance of being that host, that regional host, putting yourself in a position where somebody else has to come here, has to deal with Founders Park crowd, and has to beat you on your home turf in order to advance, then the entire season to me kind of rides on if you're that host seed or if you're a 2 having to travel.
And for as good as South Carolina is at home, we obviously know Tennessee is just as bad on the road, 2-11 on the season. They are coming off of a series win this weekend. I think they played Kentucky. They did end up losing yesterday's game 10-0 though, so very important series obviously coming up this weekend. And from a pitching standpoint, we obviously know going into the weekend that they changed the rotation around with Jones on Friday, TBA on Saturday because you didn't know how they were going to have to use Mahoney, and then Becker getting the start on Sunday. And despite losing 2 of 3, like Wes said, you feel very good about your pitching coming away from this. What the rotation's going to look like this weekend, we don't know yet, because obviously we don't know what the deal is with Will Sanders and his lower body injury. But I imagine, given how up and down his season has been, even if he is healthy, he would most likely want to go with Jones again, right?
I don't know if I'd change a thing, honestly.
Yeah.
The one thing I probably was surprised about or possibly would have changed, no, I wouldn't this week because of how things played out this past week. But I thought they had the perfect scenario, like we were talking about. I would have been tempted to go Mahoney out of the pen when they took out Eli Jones on Friday and just kind of go all in on winning that Friday game. And the way it played out, I sort of went to bed Friday thinking the same thing. Like, man, I would have just gone with Mahoney there. Now, if they'd have played it out the way I said, you're not guaranteed you're going to win the game. And you're in a situation where obviously you wouldn't have had Mahoney to go do what he did on Saturday. So who knows how it would have played out. I think that as much depth as they have had in this pitching staff for most of the year, it's kind of been whittled away a little bit in terms of some guys being hurt and some guys not pitching quite to the standard they're going to need to for Carolina to make a run, I think. And so we'll see how they play it. I mean, apparently all they needed to do was just tell Jack Mahoney, hey, you might not be starting. We might be taking your spot away from you. And he stepped up and pitched the best I've probably ever seen him against a really, really good team. So, you know, if they get that Eli Jones and that Jack Mahoney, then they're going to have a shot. But I think you're going to need those guys in the bullpen to kind of get back to what they did for most of the year to this point.
Are you surprised that we didn't see maybe a little bit more James Hicks throughout the weekend?
I am, but then you know he had a day to forget.
He had a day to forget. Just like earlier, you know, obviously with what Mahoney did in his start and Eli Jones, you know. So I think that's just, you probably felt, again, the pitching wasn't really the problem. I walked away, like if you were just kind of looking at the box score, the stats, and you just said, hey, James Hicks was only involved for 2.1. You know, he did give up, though, as you said, Wes. He gave up 4 hits. He gave up an earned run. He gave up the homer. Didn't have a great day, and the pitching didn't really seem like the issue. I mean, if you had walked away from this series and you didn't know if South Carolina had won or lost, and you just gave the run totals for Arkansas, you would have been like, that is about as good as you can get. You know, that almost would have been a dream scenario, especially with the questions going in for the pitching. Rather, it's been the hitting really this weekend, you know, was, I think, an even bigger issue. But the big picture thing I wanted to get to also, guys, Wes, you hit on it a little bit with the importance of this Tennessee series. But now if you just look around the league, I know you kind of went through the tables a minute ago, the East and the West, and it's really just turned into this meat grinder in the SEC, which it is every year. But now that we're getting towards the end of regular season play before the SEC tournament, you're really starting to see that manifest itself. So LSU, all of a sudden, one of the best teams in the country. At times, they've been the number 1 team in the country. They have now lost consecutive series to Auburn, and then they lost at home to Mississippi State. They got run ruled twice, once by Auburn, once by Mississippi State in those series, and then they lost in Game 3. Actually, I'm sorry, they actually run ruled Mississippi State. Auburn run ruled them. They run ruled Mississippi State in Game 1, then they lose Game 2, and then they lost in 10 in extras to lose that series. And now they've got a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series against Georgia, which is not maybe one of the better teams in the conference, but very dangerous. They swept Arkansas earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw when LSU was here earlier, and yeah, I know you can't go back and you can't replay something, but we knew at the time that missed opportunity for South Carolina to take 2 from LSU and then send them out of town with a 2-0 series win and just say, all right, guys, you can leave now. Instead, it being 1-1 and not playing that third game. You knew at the time, like I think in the back of everyone's heads, you were going, that could come back to hurt. And now you're looking at it, one more win over, you know, a top 10 team, top 5 team would have been just astronomical at this point. But I think even then, with LSU coming in number 1 team in the country, you saw there were some holes in this team as well. And for me, it's once you get past, you know, Paul Skeens, who is incredible, LSU may have the number 1 and 2 guy in the draft this year, which I don't think has ever happened from what I read. But once you sort of get past their superstars, LSU has some pitching depth issues of their own. So it's kind of interesting because the SEC itself is absolutely loaded, but I also don't know if there's that one team that is just absolutely better than everybody else either. So that really makes for what can just be a complete grind. And if you're South Carolina, you just got to find a way to reset and get into this weekend and play well at home. If you're the fans, you can affect this week. Look at the atmosphere at Arkansas. Like, that's special. And Carolina obviously has a great atmosphere too. They wouldn't have only lost 4 games at home this year, but that was an incredible atmosphere from Arkansas. Gamecock fans, I would encourage you not to be upset about the last 3 weeks and realize you can sit at home, sit on your hands and pout about it, or you can affect. If we had told everybody before the season started, without having any context on how it plays out, hey guys, you can go into this final week with a chance to finish the year, with an above 500 record in SEC play, and a chance to be a regional host with a home game, take 2 out of 3 from Tennessee, and you're probably going to be that. Everybody in this town would have signed for that.
No, absolutely. And yeah, it's going to be vitally important to have a great atmosphere this weekend. Out at Founders Park, they do have to get through Charlotte tomorrow first. A first pitch for that game coming up at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage can be heard at 7:15 right here on 107.5 The Game. That is a Charlotte team that did beat the Gamecocks earlier this year up at the Knight Stadium in Charlotte. Come back on the other side, and we have another recruit that has released a top 5. Is South Carolina a part of it? We'll talk about it next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
It is Monday, and you guys know what that means. It is Meatball Monday at Firehouse Subs. Hit up that Rapid Rescue, FirehouseSubs.com. Hit up the Firehouse Subs app. Whichever way you like to order. You can order for $7.99 a medium sub for the sub of the day every single day of the week from your local Firehouse Subs. There's a Firehouse Subs near you pretty much wherever you are in the Midlands. Our friend Larry Chandler, who is the supporter and main presenting sponsor of this show, make sure that you're near one at all times. So go order, again, FirehouseSubs.com, Firehouse Subs app. Meatball Monday, add pepperoni. That's the best way to have it. We'll be right back on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you on this Monday morning. Over the weekend, Keelan Adams, the 4-star wide receiver prospect out of Virginia Beach, released his top 5, announced he's going to be committing on July the 13th. That top 5 includes Ohio State, Pitt, Alabama, Virginia Tech, and yes, South Carolina as well. And this would obviously be another huge get for the class of 2024.
Yeah, I think this is a guy, honestly, that we haven't really been tracking a ton. Offers go out all the time, and guys maybe tweet out, hey, South Carolina offered. But really, when you do what we do, you're kind of trying to figure out, all right, who among these, hundreds of offers are the ones where there's true mutual interest. And, Chris, I don't know if there necessarily was mutual interest at the beginning. And this is a situation of just sort of working your connections, and there's a connection here where Juice Wells and Adams have a mutual trainer, and it was kind of one of those things where it was like, all right, hey man, you should check out South Carolina. You might like what you see, much like we see with out-of-state guys who have never been to Columbia, never been to campus, never checked out the facilities. We see this often. They take one visit and they're kind of a little bit blown away because they didn't really know what to expect. So that was the case. He visited, puts out a new top 5, has South Carolina in it, has really shifted kind of outside of just with South Carolina. His entire recruitment has kind of shifted quite a bit since the last time he put out a top group But I'm telling you, I mean, Chris, I think there's reason to believe South Carolina has gone from like not even in the mix at all to like firmly in this conversation. It's not one of those things we talk about it all the time where you have like a top 5 where maybe 4 of the schools aren't even actual factors. I think South Carolina is an actual factor here.
Yeah, and did kind of come out of nowhere a little bit. I mean, the offer from South Carolina originally went out December 2021, so quite a while back. And, he's always someone that we kind of knew about, just didn't really have a reason to track him. Hadn't heard anything about him being on campus, wasn't ever someone that was identified to us as kind of, hey, watch out for this guy. He might visit at some point, or there's a little bit of traction with this guy. It just kind of happens where that's not a throw-in because the school isn't going to bring you in. So have you watched this kid, Wes? He's pretty good.
I have not dove into the film yet.
No film room from Wes. I dove into it a little bit. And
what's your scouting report?
So his team went undefeated last season. And one of the things that stands out, I mean, he had over 1,000 yards. Had 1,030 yards to be exact last season on 41 catches, 16 touchdowns. So he's got pretty good size, but he can run. He's got good ball skills, really good after the catch, has some speed. So I think this would be a great get, because you look at the receiver prospects in this class, and I think you try to kind of identify, who are the guys, because obviously you have Mazio Bennett committed. You're going after Jonathan Paylor from North Carolina. There's some others in there, but I think you've kind of been looking around going, okay, who are some of the other guys that they're really going to have a chance to, who do they have traction with? Will somebody emerge? And clearly, Keelan Adams has now emerged as a big target, and I think would be an excellent get. And I think South Carolina is now firmly in the game here.
Well, I think if you sort of start to look ahead, and that's what recruiting is about, kind of looking ahead to the, kind of your roster a year from now, 2 years from now. And I look at wide receiver for 2023 for this season, and you feel pretty good about what they have. And then I think if you start to look ahead, though, they actually do have quite a bit of playing time to sell at that position because, this is going to be Juice Wells last year, Xavier Legette, senior, Marion Brown, senior, Eddie Lewis comes in as a transfer. This is his last year of eligibility. So really, they kind of have to start to look at who's going to be next in line. And yes, they have some guys on campus already. They're going to get their opportunities. But if I'm a big-time freshman coming in, I'm looking at this receiver room, and I'm saying, man, there's a lot of production that I could take over if I come in and do what I'm supposed to do and play well and all those things all the things that it takes to go be a guy. But you have to have that opportunity first, right? And Carolina, looking ahead to 2024, if you're a recruit, that opportunity will be there. So Mazio Bennett, Keelan Adams, Jonathan Paylor, if that's kind of your trio of freshman kind of high school receivers, then I think, A, you feel pretty good about that if you're South Carolina. B, if you're one of those guys, you feel pretty good about coming in and earning some playing time right away. And, looking ahead, I'm not so sure South Carolina probably doesn't look around and say, man, we need to go get another portal wide receiver for 24 as well, because that's the way things operate these days. But as far as SEC freshman opportunities, probably not very many situations that would be better looking than South Carolina if you're a big-time wide receiver target.
And a couple other guys to watch in the 24 class. You mentioned Bennett, who's committed. Mentioned Jonathan Paylor out of North Carolina. Zion Reagans from Georgia. He's someone that, the latest intel there, Wes, is that Georgia probably has a really good shot if they push for him out of Jones County in Gray, Georgia. But he's someone that has spoken very highly of South Carolina before. 4-star receiver Zion Reagans out of Georgia. And then another one to watch is Parker Livingston from Texas. Another 4-star wide receiver. More in the top, 350 range, so kind of on the back end. Different type of receiver. than Adams, different type of receiver than Zion Reagans or Paler, Mazio Bennett, because he's a bigger guy, 6'3", 175. And he's from Texas. He's got an official to Texas, to LSU, but also one to South Carolina. So there's a few irons in the fire now for this receiver class as we head into the summer.
Wes mentioned the transfer portal just a moment ago. We will talk the latest on transfer portal running back Logan Diggs on the other side. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
Hour 107.5 The Game.
Hey, any parents out there like me, you know that you would do anything for your kids, and that is why it is so important to protect them with life insurance from State Farm. State Farm agent Amy Mason-Cup can help you and your family make it easy and affordable to protect your children and the rest of your family, no matter what the future holds, because for the people you do anything for, life insurance could mean everything. So call State Farm agent Amy Mason-Cup in the Midlands today, 803-772-5554, or visit her website at amymasoncup.com. Amy is a South Carolina native and a local agent. She and her team can give you a personalized quote on your life insurance to meet your needs and help you save. Again, that's Amy Mason-Cup, State Farm. Her office is at 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4 in Columbia. That's just off I-26 at St. Andrews and Ashland Park Plaza. Amy Mason-Cup, 803-772-5554, or amymasoncup.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
All right, we'll come back on the other side and talk a little bit more about Logan Diggs on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. We obviously had Jatias Gear commit to the Gamecocks out of the transfer portal the other day from Syracuse at that edge position, adding a little bit of depth there. The other position that is in desperate need of a little bit of depth is obviously running back as well. And the name that we've been following for these past couple weeks since entering the transfer portal is Logan Diggs, the now former Notre Dame running back who is on the Gamecocks radar to potentially bring in here. But one of the schools they are going to have to fight with him for is LSU, and Diggs and his mother were out at LSU this weekend on his official visit.
Yeah, that's a guy we've been tracking now for, I guess, a couple of weeks. And this was what was anticipated, was that he would take his LSU official visit this weekend. And, you know, I think LSU has kind of always been the assumed place he was going to end up, even though the other side of that is South Carolina. I think gave him plenty to think about on his official visit to Columbia the weekend prior. And so I don't really know if anything has changed as far as that thinking goes. I talked to a friend of mine that covers LSU and is kind of tied in with their staff, and the thought process there as of yesterday, sort of yesterday evening, was that LSU felt like the visit went well. You know, they still expect to land him and expect to potentially hear something here early this week. Now, that's pretty common. If you go into a visit thinking you're in good shape, pretty common to, you know, feel that way coming out of it. So I wouldn't say necessarily that I'm ready to say he's a lock to LSU. I think Carolina still has a great story to sell. One thing LSU was trying to sell was, hey, man, we may have all these guys, but you can start here too. Like, you can be the guy here too. There's a little bit of, I don't know, recruiting speak there, if we want to, you know, you have coach speak, recruiting speak, but he hasn't publicly committed yet. Mm-mm. So if you're South Carolina, that's at least one positive coming out of this weekend. Let's see if they've really given him something to think about, or if it was only just enough to kind of give him another option, but LSU is still, you know, potentially the pick.
And I think on top of what you said about LSU staff, of course, any program, especially if you have a depth chart that is less appealing than another program, if you stack up LSU's depth chart, South Carolina's depth chart at running back, I don't think it's even like a subjective statement to say that LSU, they've just simply got more guys, right? And it's not like it's LSU. They're not out there recruiting 5 or 6 2-star running backs to join the roster. They have a lot of guys, right? And so that's something that Diggs, he's like most transfers. Most transfers nowadays, they're going to look at, if they're leaving a place for a better opportunity in their minds, they're going to be looking at playing time, making sure they can get playing time, a place where they feel like they can maybe have more of a starring role, better development. And then also, quite frankly, they're going to look at NIL opportunities, right? That's been much more of a driver in the transfer market than it has even in high school. I think a lot of people have thought about, okay, how's NIL going to affect high school recruiting? It's been more important in the transfer market. And so both programs can offer both those things, I think, from what we've heard. So for LSU, what they've probably had to defeat more is the idea that South Carolina's playing time situation is better. It probably is, but if you're their staff, you're understandably going to try to temper that down, right? So you can say, hey, if you look at what you did at Notre Dame, you come here, you play like that, you're going to play a lot, or you're going to start. They also, I think, guys, are going to point to the fact that, yes, they've got 6 scholarship running backs, but if you go through and look at last season and even what they had in the spring, they had several guys out with injuries during the season, and I think that extended some of those recoveries into the spring. So they may say, hey, you're healthy. You walk right in. You're going to grab your spot, and these guys that are coming back, they're going to have a hard time catching up.
And no guy of his caliber, I feel like, goes in thinking, I'm not going to win this.
I can't win that. Yeah.
So if you're recruiting a guy, you play off of that, I think. And, just the fact he is from Louisiana, was recruited by Brian Kelly originally to Notre Dame. Even with the positive vibes we got post OV to South Carolina, I've always thought it was going to be kind of difficult in the end for him to make that decision. That, again, I feel like we're dealing in percentages. Like, I'm not saying he's definitely going to LSU because we just don't know yet, but I still think it would be somewhat of a surprise. Like, if he tweeted out right now, I'm committing to South Carolina, then I would be like, wow, that is a heck of a recruiting win, not just because the player he is, but because of what you are having to overcome in order to land him.
Well, and the Brian Kelly element certainly can't be overlooked because he certainly already won him over once as a high school recruit, so he knows what things are important to him, what things he needs to sell him on, not to mention the fact that he's from Louisiana and all that other stuff. So that definitely gives them an advantage, but, I mean, until he makes the official commitment, you just never know.
Yeah, and I think if, let's say he had been recruited by Brian Kelly and he didn't sort of like the way things were once he got there, or Kelly wasn't who he thought he was, or the program was different as a player than it was as a recruit, I don't think he would even be giving Brian Kelly the time of day. So obviously it seems like he had a pretty good interaction, a pretty good experience at Notre Dame, prior to Kelly leaving. So, that's really another just, again, feather in their cap as far as this recruitment goes. But, we'll see. And if you're Carolina, I mean, they seem more than willing to wait and see what happens with Diggs. But I got to say, there is a time element here as well. You kind of want to know whether it's you or whether it's not you. You kind of want to know sooner rather than later so you can sort of figure out what is next at that position.
And what would be next? Do we feel like South Carolina has some other irons in the fire here in the transfer market?
I don't know. Do you have an answer for us?
I don't.
I mean,
it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you obviously want to see what happens with Demi Carngbe, and you circle back and maybe see what's happening there. He's obviously, I mean, those are the two main guys we have heard at running back, and past that, I don't know what your options are. I still don't think you want to go into this year putting that pressure on DJ Braswell. I eventually think DJ Braswell, as a freshman, can probably help this team, but I don't know if you want to put that on him. And, I think that also, if you get into some trouble at wide receiver, maybe a bunch of guys get banged up, that's always possible. You always have that option of playing DK some more at receiver. If DK is like pretty much, hey, you're a running back and we've got to use you at running back only 100%, then that kind of potentially lessens the potential depth, I guess, at two positions in a world if you didn't go get a transfer guy who could help you at running back.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that you circle back to Demi from NC State, see what happens there, to be determined if that did happen, if you could go get him, right? And injuries notwithstanding the injury history, that guy has some traits that, he could be really good too, right? And he would have, how many years would he have off the top of your head? He'd be he'd be more than a 1 year guy. Logan Diggs is thought of, he has more than 1 year, but from what I've heard kind of circulating, he's kind of viewing this as his last year. That can always change. Spencer Rattler was probably going to be a one and done at South Carolina and obviously didn't play out that way. But that might be a little added value in Demi. I have a feeling if they don't score an impactful transfer, and I don't think they would bring in a transfer running back unless, guys, they feel like it is an impactful one. You're not, you do need another body in that room, but you are not at a scholarship point where you can just take somebody to fill in the room. I have a feeling they might be looking around the roster saying, all right, is there anybody else that we can move over here? And I don't think there's a lot of candidates. There's not a bunch of DK joiners sitting around. There's not another Jaheim Bell on the roster right now, but I think they might be looking in that direction. So we'll have to see how it plays out on the transfer market.
All right, come back on the other side and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Come see us in person this Thursday, Gold Line Framing at 511 12th Street, West Columbia. Give them a call, 803-739-1337. But as I said, we'll be broadcasting live from Gold Line Framing this Thursday. Going to have some giveaways, maybe a special guest or two. We're going to tell you about that a little bit later on this week, but maybe a special South Carolina football player hanging out with us. You can come say what's up. You can come look at the canvases, the jerseys, the flags they have available for you at Gold Line Framing. They've been in business for over 20 years. They're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, we'll be there broadcasting live for the full 3 hours. That's 9 to noon. That's the Gamecock Central Takeover. That's Garnet Trust Hour. That's everything this Thursday. Again, Thursday, 9 a.m. to noon, Gold Line Framing, West Columbia, South Carolina.
All right, we'll talk a little bit of softball to wrap up today's edition on the other side on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. A few more minutes to go here. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you. Gamecock softball was in action over the weekend out at the SEC tournament and went on a nice little run that I think surprised a lot of people. Believe they entered as the number 10 seed. Did make it all the way to the SEC championship game before falling to Tennessee 3-1 on Saturday. But they've secured themselves a spot in the NCAA tournament, and they will head down to Tallahassee for that regional hosted by Florida State. They'll start by taking on Central Florida. That game coming up on, I believe that is Friday at 7 o'clock and broadcast on ESPN. The other teams in the regional being, of course, Florida State as well as Marist.
Yep, South Carolina opening up with UCF May 19th at 7 p.m., as you said, Tyler, ESPN2. So on the strength of that SEC tournament run, that was fun to watch. They definitely made a bigger than expected run and now earn their first NCAA tournament appearance since 2019. So Gamecocks back in the NCAA tournament, 23rd all-time bid and 8th under head coach Beverly Smith. So, and South Carolina guys, actually, some inconsistencies this season, of course, but they have taken down 11 nationally ranked opponents so far this season. Now, that doesn't mean series, right? But in games. So, they've done some really good things this year. They obviously have kind of hit their stride here at the end of the year. Listening to one of the broadcasts, one of the games, I think it was a semifinal game. You know, they had talked to Beverly Smith in their production meetings, the Gamecocks head coach, and she was just talking about how, you know, this team was playing their best at the end of the year, and that's where you want to be, right? I mean, we talk about that in baseball all the time. It's not about who looks the best at the beginning of the season or the middle. It's about playing your best ball at the end. And so maybe this is a team that could make a little bit of a run. It's going to be tough. I mean, Florida State, where current Gamecock Brooke Blankenship, shortstop, actually transferred from Florida State. They'll be down in their regional, and so obviously they got to get through UCF, and eventually it would come to Florida State if they could get there. But going to be a tough go, but they've done some good things here at the end of the year.
Well, I think this is one of those things where playing, you know, it's cliched, but it's true. Playing in the SEC prepares you for this. And I think, Florida State, they're going to be tough. You know, frankly, I don't know anything about FSU's team at this point, but I think if you're Carolina, you've faced talent just as good as Florida State throughout the year, and you've kind of been battle-tested. And, you know, I think this team, like Chris said, they've been kind of trying to figure out who they are for much of the year and figure out their best structure to go win games. And someone I thought it was very interesting, them talking about Donnie Goborn, who Dugout Donnie, as Dawn Staley has affectionately named her, and she was all SEC first team. So I went back and I was kind of doing, you know, some bio reading. Where did she come from? Was this like a star pickup? And I saw that, you know, she has had a good college career to this point, but she really has taken her game to another level here at South Carolina. And a lot of it was just adding an additional pitch. You know, they were talking about that on the broadcast in the championship game, how Beverly Smith and her staff have basically helped her to learn this changeup and how that's taken her game to another level. So I think when you have a pitcher like Goborn and, you know, a couple of other pitchers who've done very, very well this year as well, and you can kind of, I guess, ride that to, you know, to wins. We all know in softball, it's much different than baseball as far as you having to have, you know, 8 pitchers in baseball that can go get it done. Softball, they pitch on a nightly basis. You know, they pitch game to game, and they throw way, way, way more pitches. So if you have somebody like that your team sort of rallies around and can keep you in games, you can go a long way with that. And so she was all SEC first team for a reason. She was drafted for a reason. And, you know, I think Carolina probably goes into this weekend as confident as they have been in some time about their ability to push Florida State, you know, and possibly win that game on the road. And as always, you obviously have to win Friday for this to even be a conversation. But the key to these regionals and the way it's set up in softball and baseball is if you can start out 2-0, you really put your opponent on their heels for the rest of that little 4-game, basically mini tournament. And if you're the 2 seed coming in, especially, you almost have to pull off the upset the first time around and then force your opponent to battle back through the loser's bracket.
Before we get out of here, guys, I wanted to make sure that we also gave their proper due to another Gamecocks team, men's tennis, guys. First, they booked their ticket to their first NCAA quarterfinal appearance since 1989. So they are going to be heading down to Orlando for the Division I men's tennis championships. I believe they'll be matched up against Texas, round 1. And it's funny, I don't know if y'all saw this on social media. The bottom quadrant of the graphic, exact same as the college football playoff, the 4 teams that are involved in NCAA men's tennis: Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and TCU. So Gamecocks take on Texas to try to move on there, and then Virginia and Kentucky, the other teams that are in the bracket there. So good job by that team. Congratulations to Gamecock men's tennis.
Exciting time for all Gamecock athletics. Again, the softball team in action again on Friday night, taking on UCF, 7 o'clock on ESPN2. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. All three of us will be back tomorrow right here on 107.5 The Game.